My name is Savannah Reed. I'm 32 years old and I own a chain of luxury bakeries across Southern California. People online love calling me inspiring, self-made, resilient. They see polished countertops, viral pastries, magazine covers, and lines out the door every morning. Before I tell you how the people who threw me away came begging for a second chance, hit subscribe and stay with me until the end. Because this story isn't just about abandonment. It's about what happens when the child nobody wanted becomes the person everybody suddenly needs. What they don't see is the little girl who used to sit beside a window in a children's shelter, waiting for parents who never came back. Even now, there's one sound that still makes my stomach knot up. A phone ringing over and over, while I already know the person on the other end only wants me now, because I finally became useful. That afternoon, my phone lit up nonstop with unknown numbers. I ignored every single one. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 30. I kept decorating cakes, signed invoices, checked oven temperatures, smiled at customers. Meanwhile, my hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped a tray of croissants. Because the last time I waited for those people, I was 8 years old sitting in a bleach-smelling shelter with a tiny suitcase on my lap, while 2 adults promised they'd be back soon. My mother took my younger brother. My father took my little sister. And me. I got left behind. Like an extra piece, nobody had room for any more. For years there was silence. No birthdays. No calls. No Christmas cards. Nothing. Then one interview about my business went viral. One article told the world how I built an empire from nothing. And suddenly, my family remembered I existed. Before all of this happened, we looked normal from the outside. We lived in a small neighborhood outside Phoenix, Arizona. One-story house, dying grass in the front yard, basketball hoop with a cracked backboard. My mom, Linda, worked as a school secretary. My dad, Robert, managed inventory at a warehouse. My brother Ethan was easygoing, quiet, smart, the kind of kid teachers adored. My little sister, Lily, was all energy and sticky fingers and nonstop questions. And me. I was the middle child. Old enough to notice tension. Young enough to still think love was supposed to feel permanent. Back then, there were still good moments. Saturday pancakes. Cheap burgers on the grill during summer evenings. Movie nights where Lily fell asleep halfway through and Ethan pretended he didn't care when I tucked a blanket around him. For a while, home felt safe. Not perfect, but safe. Then my dad lost his job. At first, he called it temporary. Then he stopped talking about it altogether. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. Arguments started leaking through bedroom walls late at night. You can always tell when adults are lying about everything being okay. They smile too quickly. Avoid eye contact. Ask weirdly cheerful questions at dinner, while panic hangs in the air like smoke. My father started sleeping on the couch. My mother stopped laughing. Ethan stayed locked in his room. Lily became clingy. And I became the kid who listened through walls because nobody was telling me the truth. One night I heard my mom say, "We can't keep living like this." My dad snapped back, "Then leave." The silence after that sentence felt permanent. A week later, they sat us at the kitchen table and announced they were divorcing. They used soft voices like soft voices could make destruction gentler. "It's not your fault. We both love you. We're still a family." But then real life started pushing through the cracks. Who would stay where? Who could afford what? Which child would go with which parent? My mom wanted Ethan because he was calm and easy. My dad wanted Lily because she cried whenever he left the room. Nobody said my name first. Nobody fought for me. Nobody even asked, "What about Savannah?" Not until I'd already heard enough to know the answer wasn't going to sound like love. That night, I stood outside my parents' bedroom while they argued. You take her, my mother hissed. I can barely handle one kid right now, my dad shot back. She's too emotional. Then my mother said the sentence that lived inside my chest for the next 20 years. Maybe the shelter can keep her until things settle down. Keep her. Like I was storage. Like I was a problem they needed moved out of the way. 2 days later, my mom stuffed my clothes into a tiny suitcase without even folding them properly. My father drove us downtown. Nobody called it abandonment. They called it temporary. A few weeks. Just until we get stable again. The children's shelter sat behind a chain-link fence with faded paint and broken flower pots outside the entrance. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. A woman at the desk smiled at me with that awful gentle expression adults use when they know something horrible is happening, but still want credit for being kind about it. My mother fixed my collar, even though it didn't need fixing. My father signed paperwork without looking up. My little sister stayed in the car. My brother wasn't even there. We'll come back for you soon, my mother whispered. My father finally looked at me. Be good, okay? I remember staring at them, waiting for one face to crack. Waiting for one of them to suddenly realize how insane this was. Waiting for somebody to say, no, get back in the car. Instead, they walked out. And they never came back. Not that weekend. Not the next one. Not ever. The first night in the shelter, I slept on a plastic mattress that crinkled every time I moved. 4 girls shared the room. One cried into her pillow. Another stared at the ceiling like she'd memorized every crack. I slept with my shoes on because I thought maybe my parents would arrive late, and I needed to be ready. That's the kind of kid I still was back then. Not angry yet. Still hopeful. The next morning, I sat by the front window, all day watching the parking lot. Every time headlights appeared, my heart jumped. Every single time it wasn't them. A social worker asked if I wanted to make a thank you card for my parents while they got back on their feet. I remember staring at her thinking, you don't know them at all. But I was scared. So I made the card. For a few days, I tried living inside the fantasy everyone preferred. The version where I wasn't abandoned. The version where this was temporary. Then one older girl asked me quietly, did they tell you they're coming back? I nodded. She shrugged. They all say that. That sentence cut deeper than anything else. Because she said it like fact. Not cruelty. Just truth. After 2 weeks, the staff stopped saying, when your family comes back, and started saying, if we hear anything. There's a huge difference between those 2 sentences. One keeps a child alive. The other teaches her not to expect rescue. Eventually, I learned the truth piece by piece. My mom rented an apartment with Ethan. My dad moved in with friends and kept Lily with him. They rebuilt their lives. Without me. I was the only child considered too difficult to keep. Nobody says those words directly. Instead, they use clean professional language. Placement complications. Temporary care extension. No response from guardians. But all of it means the same thing. You were left. I stopped checking the parking lot after my 9th birthday passed with no card, no call, no cake. Something inside me just shut off. I became useful instead. Useful kids survive. Useful kids don't get noticed. I cleaned tables, folded laundry, helped younger girls tie their shoes, learned not to cry where older kids could see me. Because sadness made you a target. Eventually, I entered foster care. And if you've never been through the system, let me explain something. People think foster homes automatically mean rescue. Sometimes, they just mean a different kind of loneliness. One family kept my belongings in trash bags for months. Another treated me like free labor. One foster mother smiled sweetly at church every Sunday, then whispered poison into my ear at home. Maybe if you were easier to love, your parents would have kept you. She never hit me. She didn't have to. Words can bruise deeper when they land on wounds already open. By 16, I apologized for everything. For taking up space. For asking questions. For existing too loudly. Then one Saturday changed everything. One foster family sent me to volunteer at a church food program. That's where I met Marcus Bennett. Everybody called him Chef. He ran the baking station. Gray hair, flour-covered apron, calm voice. He taught me how yeast works, how dough rises, how patience changes texture. The first time I pulled fresh dinner rolls from the oven, I just stared at them. Because something beautiful had happened from my own hands. And unlike people, baking made sense. If you cared for something properly, it responded. Consistency mattered. Patience mattered. Attention mattered. The kitchen became the first place in my life that felt safe. I started volunteering every chance I got. Chef Marcus didn't pity me. That mattered. He corrected me when I rushed. Made me redo things when I got sloppy. He treated me like someone capable of excellence instead of someone broken. There's a massive difference between pity and respect. And respect was something I'd been starving for my entire life. Around the same time, a guidance counselor named Diane Foster noticed how serious I became whenever conversations turned toward cooking. She helped me apply for a culinary program. Chef Marcus trained me after hours. I started memorizing recipes the way other kids memorized song lyrics. For the first time, my future looked bigger than survival. I aged out of foster care at 18 with one duffel bag, a stack of paperwork nobody properly explains to foster kids, and enough rage inside me to power a city. I moved into a tiny apartment in San Diego with 2 roommates who didn't care about my past, as long as I paid rent on time. That alone felt revolutionary. I worked mornings at a diner, nights at a bakery, classes in between. I lived on caffeine, toast, and pure stubbornness. Every dollar mattered because stability is expensive when you've never had it. Eventually, I started selling pastries at weekend farmers markets. Brown butter muffins, sea salt honey rolls, cardamom buns people lined up for before sunrise. At first, I just wanted grocery money. Then customers started returning, bringing friends, asking where my store was. I didn't have one yet, but for the first time in my life, not yet felt more powerful than never. That's where I met my best friend, Rachel Monroe. She sold handmade pottery nearby and immediately told me my prices were too low. "You're undercharging and smiling about it," she said. I laughed so hard I almost dropped a tray. A few months later, I met Caleb Hayes. Architect, always exhausted. Ordered black coffee and the same croissant every morning for a week straight. Then one day, he tried my orange rosemary scone and literally closed his eyes like he'd seen heaven. I laughed at him. He laughed back. And somehow he became the first man who ever made me feel safe instead of nervous. Slowly my business grew. Pop-ups turned into catering gigs. Catering turned into a tiny breakfast shop. Then came the name. Second Sunrise. Because some people get handed a clean beginning. And some of us have to build a second one ourselves. By 27, I opened my first real bakery. White subway tile. Warm wood counters. Long community tables, because I wanted strangers to feel less alone while eating something warm. And I hired former foster kids whenever I could. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to age out of the system with nowhere soft to land. The business exploded faster than I expected. Local magazines wrote about me. TV stations called. People loved the story once it became polished enough to inspire them. They called me resilient, self-made, strong. Nobody saw the panic attacks, the insomnia, the fear that everything good could disappear overnight. But I smiled for interviews anyway, because success became armor. By 32, Second Sunrise had 8 locations across Southern California. I owned a beautiful home, had people who genuinely loved me, a life I built completely from scratch. And then I made one mistake. I told the truth publicly. During a TV interview, the host asked where my passion for helping foster youth came from. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was finally ready. But I told the truth. I admitted my parents abandoned me when I was 8. I admitted I grew up in shelters and foster homes. The clip went viral. 3 days later, the calls started. First Ethan, then Lily, then my mother, then my father. Voicemails stacked one after another. Please call us. There's so much you don't know. We've been looking for you. Your father's sick. We miss you. I listened to every voicemail twice, then handed the numbers to Rachel, because that woman has FBI-level instincts when something smells off. Within days, she uncovered the truth. My mother had gone through another divorce and was drowning financially. My father was seriously ill and nearly broke. Ethan had lost his job after a fraud investigation. And suddenly, everything made sense. They hadn't come back because love finally won. They came back because my success looked useful. Still, I agreed to meet them. One condition. Not Arizona. Not their homes. Not some fake emotional family dinner. They would come to my flagship bakery after closing hours. My space. My rules. When they arrived that Tuesday night, I saw them standing outside under the soft glow of the bakery lights, pretending to look comfortable. And for one split second, they almost resembled a normal family. Then reality hit me like ice water. Families don't leave children behind. My father looked smaller, weaker. My mother kept twisting her purse strap nervously. Ethan looked ashamed. Lily looked devastated. I unlocked the door. Nobody hugged me. Good. We sat at the long wooden table, where customers usually shared coffee and pastries on Sunday mornings. Finally, my mother whispered, "You look beautiful." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "You didn't come here to compliment me. Start talking." The excuses came first. We were overwhelmed. We were struggling. You were too young to understand. My father blamed drinking. My mother blamed panic. Ethan talked about regret. Lily cried and admitted she hadn't known the full truth until years later. I listened quietly. Then I stood up, walked behind the counter, and brought back 4 folders. Inside were copies of records, placement forms, case worker notes, school transfer documents, a birthday intake form listing no emergency contact. I placed one folder in front of each of them. Then I looked my parents dead in the eyes and said, "You didn't lose me. You left me." Silence. Heavy silence. Then I told them everything. The shelter. The waiting by the window. The foster homes. The trash bags. The hunger. The nights I cried into pillows so nobody would hear me. The years I apologized for existing because I thought needing love made me difficult. My mother started sobbing halfway through. My father stared at the paperwork like he couldn't physically look at me anymore. I didn't stop. They had interrupted my childhood. I wasn't letting them interrupt my truth. Then I told them about Chef Marcus, about Diane, about Rachel and Caleb, about every stranger who loved me better than my own blood ever did. I wanted them to understand something crystal clear. The woman sitting across from them was not built by family. She was rebuilt by strangers. That was their shame to carry. Finally, my father spoke. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he said quietly, "but I'm sick." There it was. The real reason. A few minutes later, Ethan admitted he hoped maybe I could help financially. Maybe support treatment. Maybe help him get back on his feet too. And honestly, that moment healed something inside me. Because suddenly, the confusion disappeared. I finally understood. They didn't come back because they loved me. They came back because they needed shelter from the consequences of their own lives. And I refused to become that shelter. I leaned back in my chair and said calmly, "I did not build this life so the people who abandoned me could come back and use it as a landing pad." My mother flinched. Lily cried harder. My father looked completely shattered. Good. For once, they felt even a fraction of what they handed an 8-year-old little girl and expected her to survive alone. I told them my boundaries clearly. No money. No fake family reunion. No redemption photos for Facebook. No access to the life they walked away from. Then I told them something they'll probably hear in their heads for the rest of their lives. Tell the truth for once. Stop calling it temporary. Stop calling it complicated. Say it correctly. You abandoned your daughter and built new lives around her absence. Nobody had anything left to say after that. They left quietly. No hugs. No miracle ending. Just truth. And honestly, that was enough. Because the real revenge already happened long before they walked through my doors. The real revenge was that they saw exactly who I became without them. The business. The peace. The love. The purpose. The life. And they realized none of it belonged to them. They weren't part of the miracle. They were the fire I survived. Today, part of every quarterly profit from Second Sunrise goes toward housing programs, emergency grants, and job training for young adults aging out of foster care. Because no child should have to become extraordinary just to survive being unwanted. And if there's one thing I need you to remember after hearing my story, it's this. Forgiveness does not mean access. Understanding does not require reunion. And family is not blood.